So today we're going to look at classroom management in the technology field classroom. So classroom management today is more challenging in the past. With classroom management today, we have to consider how students are more distracted and how it is more challenging for the students to be engaged in the classroom with all of the things that are pulling their attention away. Students today have so many electronics like video games and cell phones and tablets that they just have their mind on so many other things that they could be doing, and it pulls away from the classroom. So we're going to look at the top technology management practices. So the first one we're going to look at is consistency. So we need to be consistent in whatever it is that we do, whether it be the rules, the discipline, how the technology is used. If we have rules that they need to follow, we must discipline them the same each time when they don't follow those rules, and we must discipline them the same way as well as just disciplining them in general. Also, if the technology is not supposed to be used during certain times, then that also needs to be a part of the rule, and it needs to be a part of the rule all the time. So another management practice within technology is making sure that technology fits your needs and your goals. So if your technology isn't integrated to the lesson and it's just thrown in but doesn't fit, it's more likely that the students will wander off virtually and will be doing things they're not supposed to be doing and are not engaged. So the biggest thing is to assess to see if your technology is something that's actually needed within your lesson, or if it's something that you could do without, or if it's something that enhances the lesson. If it's something that's not connected to the lesson at all, that's something you may need to look at getting rid of. So does technology management affect lesson planning? Well, absolutely it does. You have to consider that technology being used during the planning period. You know, when you work on the lesson, you need to know if the kids know how to use it, what's available. You need to know if it will work within the lesson, if the technology is something that is compatible with your lesson. Because if you are trying to talk about communication and you want to send emails, you don't want to pull up PowerPoint. So you need to assess the technology and see what it is that you want to do and where it may fit within your lesson plan. So that's why we plan our technology during the lesson planning. So now we're going to talk about managing cell phones as a specific device that's, something that we commonly talk about or something that's more common in the classroom. So when managing cell phones, we need to have consistent rules or policies. And so with that, it just goes back to consistency. If we're going to have rules with our cell phones, we need to be consistent with those rules, and they need to be widespread. Also, when we manage our cell phones within our classroom, we need to make sure that they're only used for education and communication. There were some examples I saw online where one of the teachers used cell phones to allow his students to poll. He also did almost like a morning work when they came in every day. He sent them all a text message, and it was a question. And so then they found out the answer to that question or researched that question. This first thing is they got in, but that's a rule that they had or something that they had spoken about that they expected to do every morning. So that was more manageable because the students knew to get out their cell phones, check their messages, and then to get started on that question. Also, it talks about to be engaged with the technology. So managing cell phones, it's hard for the students to stay engaged with the technology. And so we just need to make sure that the technology helps to engage the students and not distract the students. And so now we're going to talk about best practices and bring your own device and one-on-one. So BYOD stands for bring your own device. A lot of the schools now are allowing students to bring their own devices into school because they want to be more of a technology related school or more technology in the school, but we know that there may not be the funding to provide all of the devices for all the students. So best practices with bring your own device is to have a clear policy. So that means, these are the things that you can bring, these are the things you can't bring, and you just lay it out to the students. There also needs to be a loss policy that says that the school is not responsible for anything that is lost or stolen or anything along those lines. And then there's an open policy that whatever it is that the students bring in, that the teachers are allowed to look at and go through, well, not really go through, but that they're allowed to look at just to make sure that they're being used for the correct purposes and they're not being abused. And it also talked about in one of the articles I read where if teachers bring in their own devices, they follow under these rules as well and need to have an open policy. So the last thing with bring your own device is resource restrictions. And that more or less just kind of talks about the websites that they're allowed to get to, the apps that they can get to, and that kind of thing. So that way it monitors the students' access at school and to make sure that they're not going on to something that they're not supposed to. And so now we're going to look at the one-on-one. So the one-on-one is just like each student has their own laptop or each student has their own iPad, because a lot of schools that don't do laptops are going to iPads. So there was a suggestion that I saw online that talked about just having the screen so the teacher can see. And it had like a rule of a 45-degree angle. Like the computer screen is at a 45-degree angle so that way the teacher can see it. Use it at appropriate times. That just means, don't be pulling it out in the middle of the instruction. Just things that we would think that the students would know. But we really need to teach them that, hey, I'm doing my instruction. Like, we're not going to pull out our devices until the direct instruction is over and we're on to the questioning and looking at the answers. And then also just align it with the curriculum, and that goes back to the lesson planning. Whether the technology like fits into your lesson, whether you just kind of slapped it on there to use just for fun, and a lot of times that distracts students more than it helps them. So we just talked about, something I had looked at was the aligning the curriculum, just more of a lesson planning thing. So those are the best practices on managing technology, bring your own device, and one-on-one computing.